Hi, Laurie. Welcome to MoonLore.
Thank you. We are here today to talk about the Aquarius full moon, which is happening on Friday, July 20, I don't have my glasses on,
23rd.
23rd at 10:37 p.m. That's in Eastern Daylight Time. So that's what we're looking at. We've got the chart set up here to see it. And, we always start these recordings talking about the cycle of the sun and the moon. All the planets move in cycles. Each pair of planets has its own individual cycle. And we learn about cycles by watching the cycle of the sun and the moon because it's so obvious. Why is it so obvious? How come we can notice that more than others, Jenny?
Well, because we probably all know what it looks like to see the full moon in the sky. So the moon really tunes us in. Yep.
Yeah, it really does. And, you can think about that as what it is. The sun is on one side of the earth and the moon is on the other side of the earth. And that's why the reflection shows us that full illuminated big moon. And when you look at this chart here and you see that sun and moon are in exactly opposite positions across the chart, you realize that's the full illumination of the cycle. The cycle began back 2 weeks ago when the moon was conjunct with the sun. That was the new moon. So the new moon begins the cycle. A week later, we have the moon would be up here making the first quarter phase. Now we're at the full phase, and in another week, we'll be at the third quarter phase. So walk me through, what does the first quarter and the third quarter refer to? What's that about?
Well, the first quarter really shows us, first of all, it's when you look up in the sky and it's that exact split between light and dark. So just looking at that and kind of absorbing what that means, it indicates essentially conflict or growth. So it's kind of a crossroads where some action must be taken. In the plant cycle we like to use, that's when there's a lot of growth going on. That's when the plant's really growing tall and very leafy and reaching up towards the sun. And then you get to the full moon, which plant cycle, it's like the flower. But that's where you see that our big, beautiful full moon. And then as you get to the second half of the cycle, once the moon is beyond full, it starts to wane and you start losing the light. And so when we get to the third quarter square, it's the time of the release. So that's when you've harvested the fruit off the vine now. And now everything just needs to kind of go back to compost.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the full cycle. And like I said before, all planets go through that cycle. And because it's so obvious, because we see it outside at night, we can track it very easily with the sun and moon. And the other thing that makes it easier to track with the sun and moon is that it's such a fast cycle. It's like a 28-day cycle, whereas these other planetary cycles can be many, many years in length. But we can learn a lot about all the cycles by tracking this one. So, okay. So with this one, what we're looking at is the full moon in Aquarius. So let's talk about Aquarius and let's talk about the polarity between Aquarius and Leo. The sun is in Leo, the moon is in Aquarius. So what do you know? What do you think of when you think about Aquarius?
Aquarius, probably like the quickest keyword that comes to mind is freedom. It's a very unusual sign. It's a think outside of the box sign. It's air, so we're thinking about the intellect. Whenever you have an air sign, that's a good way to think about it. In Aquarius, I feel like it's this big, broad view from far away. So it really has its eye on the future. It can see the bigger picture. What about you? What would you add to that?
I love Aquarius. Aquarius is such an amazing sign. It's, when I think about Aquarius, I always think, we'd be in the dark ages if it wasn't for the energy of Aquarius, because Aquarius really is that ability to see beyond what is now. One of the words I think of with Aquarius a lot is genius, and it's not genius like the highest IQ, but it's the ability to think thoughts that you weren't taught to think. It's that innovation. That's one of my favorite words for Aquarius is innovation. And yeah, sharp brilliance. The all signs have a very positive expression and a more challenging expression. The thing that's challenging about Aquarius is that it is so intellectual that it can be very cool, very coldly detached from emotion. It's a very unusual sign.
Yeah, and it can definitely tend towards being aloof and just kind of
Yes.
being like, you know what, I don't want to deal with emotions, so I'm not going to.
But
You
if
might,
you think about it, it's like Aquarius is the humanitarian sign. And if you're thinking about the big picture of all of humanity, it kind of, it's hard to go back and think about the individual. And that's the polarity between Leo and Aquarius, because Leo is so personal. It's such a very, very personal sign. And Aquarius is a very humanitarian sign. So they kind of straddle that line.
Yeah, and with the sun just moving into Leo just yesterday, so it's a pretty early degree full moon we have here. It's just kind of getting started. It's just warming up for that Leo season. But yeah, the polarity, I like the way that you put that, the personal aspect of Leo, because that's kind of how you balance the two. Like Aquarius has this lofty idea about community and, working with like-minded cohorts and like really gathering together. But Leo's the thing that shines the fire, like the hearth fire that everybody wants to gather around and tell their personal story.
Right.
So that's how it really brings a lot of warmth to that Aquarius, which is very useful.
Yeah, they work well together. And it's funny, people often see or think about opposition and they think there's going to be a big problem between the two, but they really are. They're two sides to the same coin. They really need each other. They need each other to balance.
I've been thinking a lot with polarities lately too. Like, I mean, it's sort of part of the human condition to feel pulled in a couple directions at once. I think all of us can relate to that feeling. And one of the interesting things is when your attention's being pulled in one direction, it might just be that you need to kind of do a 180 and put your attention in kind of the opposite end. So it's kind of like you give what you get kind of thing. Like if you want to get more, then you need to give more. It's that kind of simple adage, but it's very useful, and it's actually extremely effective when you start thinking in that way. It really expands your mind. So
yeah, that's absolutely. I think that's great. Anything else about the Leo Aquarius polarity, or do we want to start thinking about our next step, which is the path of the moon?
Yeah, no, let's look at where the moon has been.
Yeah.
Since it's new moon, so the new moon in Cancer was on July 9th. And so the moon has gone through basically the signs of Cancer, Leo, Virgo, and kind of in that direction. So Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, and Capricorn before being in Aquarius. So it's kind of covered that territory of the zodiac.
Right. So I think of the moon on its travels as it sort of collects the energies of the planets that it goes past. I don't think about, in this, when I look at the full moon, I'm not thinking about when the moon aspected all these other planets, but just when it conjuncts them, when it starts a new story with Mars, it started a new story with Venus, and then it had all this empty space that it just kind of passed through. And then just very recently, I think it's the same day, isn't it, of the full moon?
That it hits Pluto. Yes, it sure is.
Conjuncts Pluto. So before it got to Pluto, it gathered up Venus and Mars and Venus. So those are very personal planets that are very much relationship oriented. It's sort of like we're bringing what we are, some of the work that we've done in this last few weeks has been around our relationships. And then we come to Pluto. And what's that bring to this full moon?
In a word, depth. I mean, really just, it forces you into the subterranean workings underneath what is appearing on the surface.
Yeah. Depth and intensity. And I can't, yes, we're looking at what it has gathered up, but you can't not notice that the moon is right in between Pluto and Saturn. And there's a word for that, which is, we would say that the moon is besieged by Saturn and Pluto, which sounds so dramatic that I just like to say it. But the moon is now co-present with Saturn in Aquarius. So that is impacting it as well, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting how it's had its meeting with Pluto. It's kind of soaked in that sort of metamorphic intensity. And then it's heading towards Saturn, which is the planet of structure. So it's carrying that forwards into it. The other thing that's interesting is when you're looking at rulerships, this is all Saturn ruled. In the old system of rulership, Saturn rules Aquarius and it rules Capricorn. So it's a very Saturn oriented full moon. And Saturn is associated with responsibilities and discipline, structure. So it's kind of like taking responsibility for your own subterranean contents. It's like that whole going within and going into the deeper places and being willing to face that for the betterment, for your own contentment, when you fold the meaning, for your own joy and contentment to be possible.
That's so interesting. I like how you say that. So when I look over here at the aspects of that moon, whoops, I can't even make a line. That sun and moon, the only aspect, what I'm trying to say is the only aspect that's made is that conjunction with Pluto.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. There's nothing else. I mean, the story is there's this incredible intensity, this incredible depth, this seriousness of purpose, or however you want to look at that. It's a serious full moon.
It is. And then it's kind of funny because we're in a paradox because sun just went into Leo, so there's all this exuberance, and it's like August, and it's in the northern hemisphere, it's high summer and it's high play, and let's get out and play and be generous with each other, and kind of be in that child space. And yet there's this, whoa, hold on, we're gonna slow down and we're gonna get really intense about it. So it's kind of like you can't just ignore things and go off and play. Like, you've got to say, all right, there's this really intense stuff going on, we can't ignore it, and let's get into that more exuberant space, and let's be generous with one another,
and let's still go to the beach and have a picnic and have fun. I don't know why, but somehow when you said something earlier about joy, you used the word joy, and it just like, I must have been listening to something where they were just talking about joy being totally dependent on gratitude. And I thought that was really interesting, that kind of really working with gratitude is what opens us to that deep level of deep joy. I don't know if that really has nothing to do with the chart, but it was just something I thought of. And I think it's good with the sun in Leo to think about, where do we find joy? And with Leo, the generosity of Leo, and the fact that, we've got Mercury here approaching the sun in Cancer, finding ways to express gratitude. There's something in there.
I mean, I think you're spot on, Laurie, with it, because I think there's this idea in our culture that you don't want to look at the stuff that's kind of underneath the surface, like push it down, hide it, just let's pretend everything's great, and especially in America. But I think the truth is that when you allow yourself, you see those darker layers as well, it allows you to have more joy, because you just see how important it is to do that work, and then how important it is to be in the joyful space to balance it out. So it kind of adds, so when you use the word intensity for Pluto, I mean, you're right. It intensifies everything about this full moon, including the joy piece, including the gratitude part of it.
And I think the gratitude piece, you know, the fact that the moon, the only planets other than Pluto that it meets right before the full moon was the Mars and Venus. So there's a lot about bringing relationship into it. You know, that's where the gratitude's required, is in our relationships.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay.
I always think about with the Mars and Venus thing too, it's that it's contending with both your masculine and feminine sides and balancing those. And, you know, and there's a lot of palava about that in our society right now, but just being willing to take action on things, but also step back and receive and allow yourself to receive and welcome things in. So anyway, I just want to add that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, so what we want to talk about now, let's just mention, we already talked about the fact that the new moon was on July 9th, and this is the full moon to that, but in the bigger cycle, the Aquarius new moon was on February 11th. So for the bigger cycle that we're looking at, something began in early February that is now illuminated. So think back, you know, what was going on in your life on February 11th, or, you know, that week of February 11th, and how do you see that now it's illuminated in a way that has some of that innovative humanitarian sense to it?
Yeah, because I was realizing, we were talking before the video just about what was going on in February, and what I'm remembering now is that's when we had a huge pileup of planets in Aquarius.
Oh,
you know, we had so much in Aquarius. We had Mercury, we had Saturn, we had Jupiter. I mean, it was just and the sun. So I think it was the biggest pileup of Aquarian planets since I think it was 1962. So think about what is radical, what needs to be innovated, what do we need to go ahead and be the rebel about. So that's kind of what we're looking at. So this is the full moon that is responding to that massive stellium we had back in February.
That's fascinating. That's great. Okay, so now let's go into talking about where this falls in your chart. So what you need to know is, what's your rising sign? That's all you need to know. If you know what your rising sign, we're going to go through each rising sign and talk to you a little bit about where this polarity is. If you don't know your rising sign, just pay attention to your sun sign, because that will also reflect to some extent, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to start with Aries. If you have Aries rising, this full moon is going to fall in your, I totally lost it. I had it here. I went and tried to make it bigger so I could see it, and I lost it. Here it is. Okay, so if you've got Aries rising, the full moon is going to fall in your 11th house. So that's highlighting the polarity between your 5th and your 11th. That's my favorite polarity. The polarity between the 5th and the 11th is my favorite, because what you're going to be paying attention to is generosity of love. And, you know, the giving of love and your sense of freedom expanding as you give love. I'm not saying that correct, but you get what you give. So the full moon is in the 11th, and is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got a little confused on that. You're going to all have to forgive me.
All right, Lori, we know we're, that's okay.
Okay, so you go ahead with the Taurus one. I think we got it out there.
Yeah. So if you have Taurus rising, then this full moon is going to fall in your 10th house of career. So this is where you want to watch how the closeness in your home and family. So that's the 4th house that the Leo sun is sitting in. And that will help illuminate your ability to bring innovative ideas into the outer world. So it's kind of, I was thinking about a tree in this case. So as your roots anchor down with generosity, with the Leo part, then the crown of the tree grows. So
wow,
there's that. Yeah.
That's lovely. Okay. So if you have Gemini rising, the full moon is going to fall in your ninth house. So the moon is in the ninth and the sun is in the third. So it's highlighting that polarity between the ninth and the third. And so you're going to be paying attention to your wisdom, how your wisdom grows as you pay attention to what you're studying, what you're learning. So as you pay attention to details, the meaning expands.
Mm-hmm.
The meaning becomes apparent.
Nice.
Okay.
Awesome.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So let's see, if you have Cancer rising, that means the full moon is going to land in your 8th house. And so I was thinking about this being the full moon being in the eighth house is your ability to set boundaries with other people's sensitivities and stuff, the things below the surface.
Right.
And that connects how you deal with other people's sensitivity connects into how you value yourself. So there's this balance between self and other.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so if you have Leo rising, the full moon is falling in your 7th house. So it's highlighting the polarity between the 1st and the 7th. And you're going to be paying attention to how your primary partnerships evolve as you invest in your own self-development.
Nice.
So it's investing in your self-development is going to impact and evolve your relationships.
Nice, like that.
Yeah.
So let's see. So with Virgo rising, the full moon's going to land in your 6th house, and the sun will be in your 12th house. So with that one, where you want to, it's kind of this connection between your capacity for spiritual growth and your daily practices. So it's like you sit on your meditation mat in order to understand your connection to the divine. So the important part is just where that full moon is highlighting your daily practices.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. Okay. And if you've got Libra rising, the full moon is falling in your 5th house. So it's highlighting the polarity between the 11th and the 5th. You're going to want to notice how your desire and inspiration around creativity increases as you celebrate the success of others.
Nice.
Yeah, that's very nice.
Yes, like that.
I do too.
So let's see. So with Scorpio rising, that full moon's going to land in your 4th house, and the Leo sun will be up in your 10th house. So you're thinking about, notice when you celebrate the enjoyable parts of your career, your family relationships become more robust and healthy. So it's kind of like when you're happy at work, you bring that on home, and that's the connection. Yeah.
These polarities are so important. I mean, I think, anyone who is studying astrology, one of the things that you really want to pay attention to is polarities, because they just work so well. If you understand one, you understand the other. They're really great. So let's see. You just read the one about Sagittarius?
Scorpio.
Scorpio. Okay. So with Sagittarius rising, the full moon is falling in your 3rd house. So it's highlighting the 9th and the 3rd. And you want to pay attention to the joy of gaining wisdom from other cultures gives you innovative ideas about your own closer to home locale and understanding. Okay, cool.
Nice. Let's see. So with Capricorn, that means that the Aquarius full moon will land in your 2nd house, and you'll have the Leo sun in your 8th house. So this is watching how your ability to be generous with other people's intense emotional struggles allows you to see yourself and your own struggles with less attachment. So it's kind of like if you can be compassionate with others, it helps you be more compassionate to yourself.
That's awesome. Okay. And then if you've got Aquarius rising, the full moon is in your 1st house. So the Leo sun is in your 7th house. And you're going to want to pay attention to the warmth that you receive as you nurture your intimate relationships allows you to be more true to who you are, your own personal self.
Nice. Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then last we have Pisces rising. So this is when the full moon's going to land in your 12th house, and the sun will be over there in the 6th house. So this is again that connection between your daily practices and your connection with the divine or the bigger picture or the collective. So it's kind of like noticing that your connection to the collective feels effortless as you find a sense of playfulness with your daily practices.
Wow.
So you notice that we're kind of talking about two ends of the these different houses. So it's interesting to think about if you put energy in one side, what happens to the other side, and that's kind of what we're trying to highlight here.
Yeah, yeah. That's what you really want to pay attention to, is how those two work together. So where's this full moon fall in your chart, Jennie?
It falls in my 8th house.
The full moon falls in your 8th, so it's between your 8th and your 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Are you excited?
Yeah. I mean, I do feel like I am in this place of like watching other people struggle with certain things and just like being in the support place, but then watching how it impacts me and just, setting boundaries with them, but also being more compassionate and understanding, which helps me value myself and how I'm going to balance things out with them. So,
and yeah, that 8th house, boundaries is such an important thing. Yeah, for me, it's happening between my 6th and my 12th, and I'm kind of overwhelmed by dealing with 12th house issues at this point. But so with the moon itself will be in my 6th, so that's actually really good. Like let some of that rest for a minute and pay attention to it, but putting more effort into the 6th house side of it with the moon there.
Yeah.
Fascinating indeed. Great. Indeed. All right. Are you excited about Leo season?
Oh, hell yeah. Woo!
All the Leo people we know are like cheering and getting excited. I sent little Leo emojis to, I don't know if I sent one to you today. I think I did. Anyway, happy Leo to all of you, and happy Aquarius full moon. Enjoy it, work with it, and we'll be back for the Leo new moon.
Got it.
Coming up in 2 weeks. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. Thanks, everybody.